Alrighty then, it's time to do another wrestling what if. Something I don't really do a lot, but if I'm being honest, I don't really have many to do. Uh, because they take a long time to edit, and plus it takes a long time to think of scenarios. Where anime it takes pretty quickly, wrestling what ifs it's pretty long. But yeah, today we're gonna talk about what would happen if MJF decided to go to the WWE in 2015. Not decided, I'm sorry. I meant what if he got signed by the WWE in 2015? Now, this is a very unique scenario, and I will address how and why he gets signed in this specific year. But today we're gonna have to watch the little butterfly effect on what MJF's career would have been like if he was signed to a different promotion. Now, first, let's talk about why he gets signed. The year is 2015, and WWE decides to bring back Tough Enough for another year for some odd reason, even though the last few kind of failed. So during this time, they got a lot of top stars, but in this timeline, one of these stars is a different man. And this one goes by the name Maxwell Jacob Friedman. Now, this young man was basically gifted. He had a great physique, he had a great look, he had a great speaking style. He basically, he was the whole package. And not only that, but he was only 19. He basically was very young and definitely could have been used as a top tier star in the future. So in this world, WWE is smart enough and do bring MJF into Tough Enough. Now, as for if he wins or lose, uh, let's be honest, I doubt MJF's winning because Tough Enough's just kind of one of those things where most of the people who win kind of suck, save for John Morrison. But yeah, I could say that MJF could win. I don't really remember who won Tough Enough. I know. Okay, I know two. I don't know. I know two people win, but I don't know who won one of them. I know the females won. She passed away, but I know the other one was like a male. I don't know what he was. Maybe MJF could replace him. I don't know. Or maybe MJF just fails Tough Enough and WWE just signs him anyway. Another Patrick Clark situation where everyone's like, oh, this guy's too good. You can't let him go. So WWE listens. And they decide to keep Maxwell Jacob Friedman under developmental kind of thing where they want to develop him more. So for a while, MJF's going to be kind of developing himself on live shows, kind of giving himself a bit of a character and some backstory and some lore. MJF would then make his big NXT debut by challenging Shinsuke Nakamura for the NXT title. Pretty ballsy thing for this kid to do. And he basically challenges Nakamura and he fails. Like, he does good and he almost does win the belt on a few occasions. But the fact that he had the balls to go against Nakamura of all people does kind of impress the fans, and they do kind of give this young kid some credit, even though he does have an ego problem. But minus from that, he almost won the NXT title on his first night, but he did good enough and did impress the fans. After that, we would then get some NXT shows, and MJF would kind of need to develop himself more and not really be on any takeovers yet, until a few months later during TakeOver War Games, where he fights Drew McIntyre for the NXT title. So this is kind of a big deal for him. His first takeover, and it's for the NXT title. His second time going for the said title. And a lot of people are kind of doubting this kid. He's like, no way he's beating no way he's beating Drew McIntyre. Sorry, I botched there. But however, MJF is able to defeat Drew McIntyre. By some miracle, he defeats the Scottish psychopath, or whatever his nickname was during that time. MJF defies the odds and does that. So, what would MJF's next title defense be? Okay, so for starters, I do want to address this, that MJF would technically be taking Andrade's place when MJF holds, like, the belt, so in other words, Andrade would never hold the NXT title in this timeline. So I just want to address that because I almost skipped that part, so there's that. I think you can tell that I'm kind of rushing the video because I know it's going to be a long one. so I just want to at least shorten it down. But I'm botching in the process, so yeah. Well, let's talk about the first title defense, though, anyway. So, MJF's first title defense is pretty big, as he's in a 6-man ladder match. Now, his opponents are Eric Young, Andrade, Aleister Black, Johnny Gargano, and Adam Cole. Baby. Now, as for how he does in this match, he does really good and actually retains the belt. Now, I do feel like there would be some spots in this kind of match, like Tommaso Ciampa makes his big return, they screw Gargano over, we could get some kind of cool ladder break spot from like Adam Cole and Aleister Black. Maybe they can do the steel chair spot they did in their actual Extreme Rules match. I don't know, we would get a lot of cool spots, but MJF's coming out of this with his NXT title still on his waist. His next opponent would be one of the opponents from his previous TakeOver defense, and that's Aleister Black. And at New Orleans, Aleister wants to take the belt for himself and wants to get that off of MJF. And Aleister actually does. Shockingly, MJF loses his title to Aleister Black. MJF obviously doesn't accept defeat here and challenges Aleister to another match at TakeOver Chicago. Now, as for the stipulation, MJF picks for this to be a submissions match because MJF's finishing move was the Salt of the Earth kind of lock attack where he basically did that whatever the heck you pronounce the name, the armbar thing he does. That would kind of be MJF's specialty in that match. And beforehand, during previous NXT shows, MJF would target Aleister Black's arms and basically lock them inside of his attack, which Aleister would almost tap, but Aleister's able to win by connecting a Black Mass to MJF's right knee and locking him into a knee hook, and then after that taps MJF out and basically keeps the title on himself. After that, MJF would then feud with EC3 for TakeOver, which would kind of be a really good match if I'm being honest, because they're both really good on the microphone and both are very charismatic, so I think those two could put on a decent match where MJF is going to go over. MJF's next match will be the man who is a literal monster who does not deserve praise, but I have to give him praise here. So, yeah, Velveteen Dream. Honestly, this would just be a good match, but I can't really talk about Velveteen Dream without addressing that. So I'm just going to briefly say Dream's going to win, and this is going to be MJF's go-home match for NXT. Kind of putting over the Dream for Dream to get a big future push, only for that future to go down the drain. Yeah. Well, MJF does get back on the momentum train by making his main roster debut in the 2019 Royal Rumble, though. As for how he does in the Rumble, I would probably have him go in, like, pretty early and then last around the middle part. He wouldn't make it super long. He's not an Iron Man by any means. But he does pretty good enough and does get eliminated by probably like, I don't know, Braun Strowman or something. But like in the original world, Seth Rollins will be winning this match. So yeah, either way, Rollins is going to take the Royal Rumble win at the end. By this point, MJF would start going on Monday Night Raw more, and that would kind of be where he's going to be going off to during the draft. And not only that, but he would make his big WrestleMania debut in the Andre the Giant Battle Royal. Now, a lot of people are really doubting his odds of winning, but however, MJF is able to pull an upset by eliminating Braun Strowman. Like, obviously, he cheats after, like, the two comedian guys are kind of holding that whole Strowman joke thing. After Strowman eliminates them, MJF sneaks behind, goes to eliminate Strowman. Those two help MJF, and MJF gets his big WrestleMania moment and wins the Andre the Giant trophy in a very shocked kind of manner. But yeah. And on the next night of Raw, MJF makes his big first main roster singles match where he fights Finn Balor. And MJF wins the match. He doesn't win the belt from Finn Balor, though, granted, but he wins the match, and it's actually a pretty big moment for MJF. And basically shows the kind of top star he is by defeating someone who's a champion already. But however, MJF's first main roster feud is... This is kind of predictable, but screw it. it would be a good feud, and that's The Miz. Before you say anything, Miz was a babyface during this time, so it doesn't count, so it actually would work, so they can feud. So MJF and Miz's storyline could probably be something like how, oh, Miz has become so soft ever since going for the fans, and look what the fans have done to you. Now you're putting your body on the line against Shane McMahon and losing against him. And Miz can be like saying how he used to be such a jerk, but then he realized that, you know, being a heel is not a good thing and he needs to be a babyface. MJF will obviously win this match. Like, I don't see him losing to Miz here. But this is just a matchup for MJF and Miz to have, because legitimately they could actually have great promos with each other. And because they're going to have good promos, of course you got to run it for a second time. MJF's still going to win, but this is just here so you can have more to the feud, so MJF can kind of have a few extra months, and kind of get some good heat off of him by beating Miz, while also getting a big moment. Up next, MJF's next big opponent, will be Braun Strowman at Stomping Ground. Yes, Strowman will not forget MJF for eliminating him for winning the Andre the Giant trophy. MJF will be winning this matchup, only by the skin of his teeth though. So he's gonna cheat his way into winning against Strowman, only by like disqualification or countout. So MJF does outsmart Braun Strowman yet again, and basically outsmarts other people. He's basically using his brain to win all of his matches. Next matchup would be against Humberto Carrillo. Carrillo. I don't know how to pronounce the last part of his name. MJF will be winning this match, obviously, and to be honest, 2019 as a whole is just skippable. The rest of 2019, he really has no real accomplishments. He's just there for some matchups, and really that's it. No real champion wins, no real life-changing matches. He's just there on the card. But however, during the Raw draft, MJF will be moving to Raw. So he does go to Raw, and he's going to stay on Raw for a bit longer again. We then make it to 2020, where we start the year of MJF. When I mean the year, I mean MJF's going to actually start doing a lot here in this timeline. So MJF will be in the Rumble 2020, but he's going to just be a fodder elimination to not Braun Strowman, but Brock Lesnar. He'll just be there, he'll enter in pretty early, and then Brock's going to F5 him. But I do think you could get some comedic spot where MJF's trying to find a way to outsmart Brock Lesnar. But Lesnar shows he's no idiot, and he destroys MJF with showing that sheer brawn is going to destroy sheer brain in a WWE match. And like what originally happens, Drew McIntyre still Claymore kicks Brock out of the ring, and later on in the matchup, he is still winning this match. So Drew is still going to main event Mania like in the original world. And at WrestleMania 36, MJF's next opponent will be Ricochet for his first singles match. This is kind of there because Ricochet wasn't really fully buried yet, and was still at least able to have a few matchups. So giving him a Mania match against MJF could work. Now MJF will win this match obviously, but however, Ricochet's going to show that he is a good wrestler and come close to winning, but MJF is able to use cheap shots to win. The next real match for MJF to compete in will be the Money in the Bank, the corporate ladder match, where he's going to go in the spot of Baron Corbin. So MJF's going to take Corbin's spot in this match and will basically be in this match. And a lot of people are going to assume, oh great, Otis is going to win again. Not in this world. MJF's the one who's winning. Now as for why, I mean, Otis was kind of a temporary winner, and like in the long term, it only went to Miz. So I'm just saying, MJF is just a younger version of Miz, so if you're being smart, and I do think Vince and Hunter would be smart here, they would give MJF this over Otis, because long-term Otis dropped it to the Miz. MJF, on the other hand, seems like someone who would probably make sense with the briefcase. Having him actually win the match, and then not only that, but having him win the world title would make more sense. And he's basically a younger version of Miz, like I said earlier, so it actually would work here. So if you want to build up the future, it's the best choice to give it to MJF here instead of waiting it to give it to Miz, who's almost 40. His next matchup will be Apollo Crews for the United States Champion at Extreme Rules. And legitimately, good luck keeps rolling in for MJF as he beats Apollo Crews and becomes the US title as well. So in other words, MJF not only has the Money in the Bank, but now he has the United States Champion. So he's basically an even bigger threat as he has 2 big prizes now. Apollo Crews is obviously going to ask for a rematch and get his rematch against MJF at SummerSlam, which MJF's going to win this matchup against Apollo Crews, obviously. And not only that, but they would run it back for Payback, which, yet again, MJF's going to win because he is better than Apollo Crews, and you know it. His next opponent would end up being Ricochet. So this would kind of be a nice little refresher so we don't get Apollo Crews versus MJF too much because it might get stale. So instead, MJF's going to fight against Ricochet. Now, MJF and Ricochet have already technically had their matchup at WrestleMania 36, so it's going to kind of be the same here. Obviously, MJF's going to win, and basically he's going to go over against Ricochet. His next opponent would be Keith Lee, basically a monster of a wrestler, which MJF legitimately, realistically should stand no chance against. But however, he is a lot smarter than Keith Lee and uses his big brain powers to actually defeat Keith Lee and actually retain his belt. His next matchup would be at Survivor Series, where he fights Sami Zayn for the brand split thing, because Sami was the Intercontinental title during that time. And legitimately, it'd be nice because Sami did confirm in an interview he would have liked to work with MJF. So it's a nice thing to have Sami's dream kind of come true in this world, I guess. And I do feel like the crazy conspiracist Sami Zayn could be an interesting foil to MJF. MJF's this well-kept, kind of well-groomed man, while Sami Zayn looks more like a homeless man. So it could be a very interesting story to tell. And the winner of the matchup is obviously going to be MJF, to be honest. You could give Sami the win if you want, if you feel like MJF is being too dominant, but I would keep MJF as a dominant wrestler here at the moment. Keith Lee will obviously get his rematch against MJF at TLC, which MJF and Keith Lee would fight in a probably chairs, tables, or ladders match, probably a stipulation kind of matchup to it, where MJF will be winning this matchup. If I'm being honest, I'd probably make it like a ladders match or something, just so we could see Keith Lee probably do like some kind of crazy spot off a ladder, which could be a really fun spot to watch. MJF would honestly win the matchup because he's basically using his intelligence and his heel-like wrestling style just to make it ahead in life. His next opponent would be the Stoner Bro, Matt Riddle, at Royal Rumble. So MJF will be fighting Matt Riddle for the US title, and he's going to retain because of cheap tactics. Riddle obviously doesn't accept that and challenges MJF to an Extreme Rules match, where Riddle beats MJF for the US title. MJF is definitely furious at this outcome, and basically, after his loss, he goes out on the backstage and says, "I promise this isn't going to be the last you see of me." And at first, people are like, ha, lol, whatever. But then people are kind of forgetting something. The briefcase MJF carried around was the Money in the Bank. The Money in the Bank, if you cash it in, you get a free world title shot. So after Drew McIntyre's brutal Elimination Chamber match, MJF runs in, cashes in, and steals Drew McIntyre's championship from him. And basically, MJF comes off as a really big heel at that point and a very unlikable one, taking the easy way out yet again with his briefcase cash-in. So by Fastlane, Bobby Lashley, Drew McIntyre, and MJF are going to be facing in a triple threat match. MJF would probably need this kind of matchup. Drew obviously wants his big title back, and Lashley because, well, he probably gets screwed over at Raw because MJF is not like Miz, and he's going to find a way to get out of the Hurt Log without tapping out instantly. And plus, I don't think MJF should be a transitional champion. That's no fun. So, MJF will be retaining his belt because MJF is very smart and knows how to get his way, with Lashley and Drew basically dominating each other most of the match. And after MJF is done, on this day, I see clearly. Yeah, I was getting ready to sing, but no. It's Edge. Edge comes out and he wants to fight MJF for the WWE Champion because of course he does, and he picks him to fight at WrestleMania instead. Before you say, "Oh, what about WrestleMania?" Well, legitimately, Daniel Bryan ruined that big WrestleMania match between him and Roman by being inserted, which was a kind of a dumb decision if I'm being honest. No offense to Bryan, but he had no business to kind of be there. So MJF's just gonna fight Edge instead. Bryan and Roman can just fight at Mania instead. I don't care. And this would be a big WrestleMania match, MJF versus Edge. And honestly, I feel like this would be a pretty big matchup that could main event Mania. Like either like instead of the Roman match, or maybe even instead of the Bianca or Sasha match. I think Bianca and Sasha could still main event night 1. And then this matchup could probably be like the main event for night 2. Because you technically have 2 SmackDown matchups main events WrestleMania, so it'd be nice if Raw got to main event 1 Mania, and then SmackDown got to main event the other. And MJF will end up retaining his belt against Edge, obviously. And it looks like Edge is about to win, but MJF will obviously find a way to beat him. But however, Edge does use cheap tactics of his own, proving MJF that he's the real ultimate opportunist. But MJF is basically one of those guys who's like out with the old and in with the new. And MJF shows that he's able to outsmart Edge yet again. Same with some other talents. At Backlash, we watch MJF fight Braun Strowman, which MJF will obviously be afraid because this is a tough opponent for him. But MJF's going to win because he's very smart and knows how to get his way with cheap tactics. He basically cheats out Braun Strowman, and he doesn't really need to worry because Strowman gets fired like a few weeks later. And not kayfabe fired, I mean actually fired. So yeah, MJF, he can be happy. And then after that, MJF is basically forced to compete in the Hell in a Cell with Drew McIntyre. Yes, MJF and Drew McIntyre inside the Hell in a Cell. And most of the matchup is just MJF being tortured. Like, MJF is basically trying his best but gets tortured. But however, by some defined miracle, MJF retains the belt yet again from Drew McIntyre. And MJF is basically showing that, well, he's using his intelligence to be a great champion. Like, I don't know, if I'm being honest, like, he's basically the ultimate opportunist gimmick, but if he was more or less using more heel tactics to win his champions. Like, Edge's ultimate opportunist WWE title run was honestly kind of short, so we didn't really get to see much of it. In the case of MJF, like, MJF kind of gets to actually show that off more. Like, the ultimate opportunist heel kind of cheating himself into winning every match he gets. And that honestly is a lot better. So MJF, it'd be more like Ric Flair, to be honest, though. Like how Ric Flair always cheated to win his matchups. So MJF kind of comes more off as a Ric Flair than an Edge type character, I guess. Up next is Money in the Bank, where MJF will fight Kofi Kingston, basically Bobby Lashley's original opponent. I'll be using some of Lashley's original opponents from his original run for some of these. So MJF will be fighting Kofi, and MJF is obviously going to win, but it will not be a squash match. Kofi will get offense and actually do pretty good in the matchup, but MJF yet again is going to find a way to get Kofi out of the matchup and basically steal the champion yet again. And by SummerSlam, MJF will fight John Cena. As for why, instead have Goldberg fight Roman, because if we're being realistic, Goldberg is not going to put over MJF. Goldberg is one of those people who doesn't really, like, from what I've heard, apparently he doesn't like putting over other people. Like, he'll only put over certain people. Like, if he thinks they have a good enough type of body for him, like Drew McIntyre or Roman Reigns. Like, someone like MJF, like, granted he has a good physique, but he's not that big compared to Goldberg. MJF would without a doubt be someone Goldberg wouldn't want to put over and would just want to squash. So I'm gonna be safe and let John Cena be the one to fight MJF, because Cena would definitely put him over. And Goldberg can just fight Roman Reigns instead at the end. So yeah, Roman can, because Roman, he would put over Roman. Cena would also, so basically, in other words, it's basically a win-win. We get Cena versus MJF, a kind of big kind of feud for Cena to overcome another top heel. And we also get to watch Goldberg and Roman Reigns at SummerSlam. And Goldberg's going to obviously lose to Roman Reigns, because why not? And MJF is going to beat John Cena, because Cena's a Hollywood guy. Having him win the title, he's just not going to do much. But I would like to see the MJF and John Cena promos, let's be honest. And on Raw, MJF will cut a promo saying how he is the new Legend Killer, and Randy Orton comes out hearing the words Legend Killer, and basically, he remembers how he was back then. And he tells MJF, prove you're the Legend Killer by defending your title on Raw. Or, like, MJF's gonna try to find a way to get out of it. He's like, I'm not, fighting Cena, I'm a little sore. And Orton's like, okay, I guess you're not a Legend Killer. And then MJF can kind of get angry. He's like, okay, fine, I'll do it. Because, MJF, his ego will usually get the best of him for something. And I think in a case like this, his ego will get the best of him here, and he will say something out of line. So Orton and MJF fight, and Orton obliterates MJF. Like, obliterates him. Orton goes ahead and RKO, but MJF reverses it to a roll-up. After that, MJF celebrates, and Orton RKOs him again. And basically, he leaves him knocked out until Big E Langston runs in with his Money in the Bank, hits the big ending, 1, 2, 3, and MJF loses his championship belt to Big E Langston. Wow, what a way to go out. So, MJF is pretty furious about this loss, and is obviously going to get his rematch clause. So at Extreme Rules, MJF will fight Big E Langston, but he'll put a certain stipulation. MJF makes the stipulation, the Maxwell Jacob Freeman rules, where MJF gets to make up the rules along the way kind of matchup. So Big E Langston could try to do something like, he goes for a 3 count, but before he gets it, MJF's like, no, you have to end it by 5 counts. And Big E's like, oh, come on. Then MJF grabs a chair. He's like, okay, here's another rule. It is no disqualification. Hits Big E. Big E grabs a chair. He's like, wait, Big E. If you hit me with the chair, you get disqualified, and I get the champion handed to me for free. MJF using heel tactics yet again. But however, Big E Langston, he overcomes the odds and gets a nice underdog moment by defeating MJF. So it basically shuts MJF up. And it's honestly a big feel-good moment, because now you kind of watch MJF finally get knocked down a peg to Big E Langston. And basically Big E can have a nice little underdog babyface run. And that whole thing can kind of go the same, I guess. After that will be Survivor Series, where MJF will be a part of the Survivor Series tag team match, the 5v5, and he'll just take Kevin Owens' place, because Owens was a heel during this time, and you kind of need a heel to do this match, and I think MJF would kind of be the best pick for a heel for this match. And I do feel like the other guys who were on the team for Raw made more sense, and I honestly don't really remember who won this match in real life, by the way. So, MJF could be on the winning or losing team, it really doesn't matter. And yeah, MJF could win or lose, it doesn't matter. But the next pay-per-view will be Day 1. Now, as for what happens on Day 1, MJF will be in the Fatal 5-Way, but instead it'll be a 6-man match. So it'll be a 6-man world title match with Brock Lesnar included, but however, it would be one of those things where it's supposed to be a Fatal 5-Way, but due to Roman's COVID, it doesn't happen. And Brock Lesnar defeats MJF and the others to win the world title. But in a world where Brock never was in it, could MJF win the belt? In my opinion, maybe. It would either been him or Seth Rollins, like the original plan. But it's more unlikely that Brock's still just going to take the belt at the end, so yeah, it doesn't matter. Royal Rumble 2022 is next, and MJF will do pretty good in the Rumble, make it really far, and then Brock Lesnar steals another MJF moment, because at this point, Brock's just going to ruin MJF's life. That seems like a Brock thing to do, let's be honest. And at WrestleMania 38, MJF gets a big WrestleMania moment, and this is probably the darkest thing I've ever done on my channel. Like, I've never said anything screwed up or done anything screwed up before, but I'm putting a man with heart issues in a wrestling match. I don't think I've hit my head any today. Well, okay. We can make up the scenario. Maybe in this world, maybe this is a universe within a universe where Triple H never goes through the heart attack issues, or maybe the heart attack issues aren't that bad to a point where Triple H cannot wrestle in a ring. So it's one of those things where MJF can actually put on a match with Triple H, and plus MJF is a safe worker, so yeah. MJF can kind of do his whole thing with Triple H, and it would be a no-holds-bar match, because obviously that has to be where Triple H retires, his big specialty match, and MJF ends up beating Triple H with the sledgehammer to retire him. So in other words, he's basically retiring him with the sledgehammer, Triple H's special move. So MJF wins the matchup and retires Triple H at WrestleMania. At Backlash, MJF's next feud is Dolph Ziggler. And I think these two could actually put on a really good match, because honestly, MJF kind of needs an opponent for now. And plus, Dolph's a pretty good talent and a very reliable one who could obviously put over MJF. So this could be a good matchup for MJF to get another win on his belt, and plus to get an entertaining matchup out of Dolph Ziggler. MJF's going to win the matchup, obviously, but this is just there so Dolph and MJF can kind of have something to do and get MJF a little entertaining matchup, because, let's be honest, I think MJF and Dolph could put on a good match. And his next opponent and his next starting feud would be the Mysterios, so at Hell in a Cell he would fight Dominic Mysterio. Now, it's not going to be in a Hell in a Cell match, obviously, but just a normal match where the entire storyline is about MJF telling Dominic that he's under his father's shadow, saying stuff like, "Oh, you're nothing. You're just under your poppy's shadow. You don't mean nothing, blah, blah, blah." Kind of mocking Dominic. And even though Ray doesn't want Dominic to do, he's like, look the other way, avoid talking to him. And Dominic's like, "Nah, I want to prove this guy wrong." So at Hell in a Cell, we get Dom versus Maxwell. MJF's winning this one, because obviously he's gonna win, because heel tactics. And he basically just comes out the winner again. And then we get to the next pay-per-view, Money in the Bank, where MJF will end up fighting Rey Mysterio to kind of continue the Mysterios feud, where MJF is kind of trying to ruin the relationship between Dominic and Rey. And not only that, but can also lead to potential foreshadowing to when we get to Clash at the Castle, where Dominic finally leaves his dad behind. So it is a very interesting idea, and I honestly think you could get some nice little foreshadowing / build up to it. And the winner of this matchup will obviously be MJF. And at SummerSlam, we get MJF and a partner of his choosing versus Rey Mysterio and Dominic Mysterio. Now, as for MJF's partner, it's pretty obvious that he's going to pick someone that would obviously make the matchup unfair, and that's Omos. The whole time, MJF basically uses Omos to wrestle the match. We will get some hot tag moments with Rey and Dom, but Omos is mostly destroying. MJF's kind of taking some rest, and basically, after it's over, MJF tags himself in, steals a pin, and basically pins like Rey or Dominic, and basically leaves the ring, and MJF just walks out as the Ultimate Savage. Up next, MJF would go into a feud with Johnny Gargano for basically a best-of-7 series. And it would basically be one of those things where MJF and Gargano just trade wins. So their first match at Extreme Rules, it's going to be going to MJF because of heel tactics. Their next few matchups are kind of a switch around, and by Survivor Series War Games, Johnny Gargano is going to win that match. And then we get to Royal Rumble, where we get to the ending of the feud, where MJF will be the one who ends the feud on top at the end. But Johnny can kind of get that moment where he's like, "Hey, I did good against MJF." MJF will obviously be in the Royal Rumble, and MJF will do pretty good in the Rumble, but like what originally happened, Cody Rhodes still wins the Royal Rumble, like in the original world. And then after that, MJF would end up going into the Elimination Chamber match, taking the spot of Montez Ford. And basically, he would also kind of do pretty good in this match. And this is also MJF's first chamber match, shockingly. And he does not lose, and he doesn't win the match. It's like he loses the match, obviously, and he's not going to win. So he's not taking the US title back. And instead, Logan Paul's going to screw him over. So I would probably, instead of it being Seth Rollins, I would have Logan Paul versus MJF. As for why, I honestly thought Rollins and Logan, like, while it was a good match, I thought Rollins could have done better on Mania than fighting Logan Paul of all people. That could have been a good other pay-per-view match, not a WrestleMania match. So instead, MJF can fight Logan Paul, and MJF can be the one who beats Logan Paul the same way. So, legitimately, they have the same matchup in my honest opinion, and it just kind of goes the same. We would then get to Night of Champions, where MJF would take AJ Styles' spot in fighting Seth Rollins. As for why he did this, let's be honest, AJ Styles kind of came off as a crybaby because he was complaining about him being in a world title match because he said it doesn't matter, so why does he deserve to be in the match in the first place? So instead, let's just give it to MJF. MJF also would be going to SmackDown in this timeline because he's going to need a nice little refresher to his character, and I think SmackDown can help refresh his gimmick. He will fight Seth Rollins, and Rollins will still win the belt, and currently where I'm recording the video, this is kind of where the WWE part ends, and this is kind of where the video ends at that point, so yeah. At that point, this would kind of be the video's ending. But before we call it the ending, we still need to talk about one last thing, and that's MJF's All Elite Wrestling run. In a world where MJF was never a part of AEW, how does the company go? Without having one of their biggest draws in their kind of history and one of their more entertaining stars, what would their kind of careers have been like? Well, let's see what AEW's life is like. Well, for starters, Bret Hart is never interrupted during his big speech. That's a good thing. Another big change is that Cody Rhodes might actually have won the world champion from Chris Jericho. I mean, had MJF never been there to throw the towel, but towel. I don't know, sometimes they'll say tower instead of towel instead of tower. But to the point, had MJF never thrown that towel, Cody Rhodes could have technically won the match, assuming he was able to go the distance. He may have just passed out from exhaustion from the holes, but if he does not pass out from exhaustion and he's able to keep going, then maybe he can win. Very unlikely, though. But I remember hearing somebody was supposed to win, so maybe he could have won. Probably not, but who knows. He'd probably just lost to Mox straight after, though. Another change would be that Wardlow's debut would have to be a lot more different. So without MJF, you would have Wardlow's debut a lot more different because he would not have to be MJF's bodyguard, so he would need to do something else. I would just have, for the sake of the plot, him just attack Cody Rhodes straight after the Full Gear match, basically turning him heel instantly and making him this monster heel for Cody to overcome and have to try to slay. So at Revolution, they can have their big match, and they could have the steel cage match up there instead, and Cody can just win like he did originally. It doesn't matter. We would also miss out on some good MJF feuds, such as the feud with Jon Moxley and the Inner Circle, and kind of that's it, because he honestly doesn't really do much. We also would miss out on the Punk feud as well, which would be really terrible too. And another big change to come out of it is that we never get the iconic MJF pipe bomb from 2022. So without that big pipe bomb, you don't really get to see behind the curtain of Tony Khan being called out for his kind of bias of pushing former WWE stars. And that was kind of needed to happen. You needed someone to actually have the balls to call Tony out for that said thing. And legitimately, I think MJF was the best guy to do it. Without MJF doing it, who knows? Maybe people would have, no one would have never had the balls to call him out, and we would probably see some other WWE guys win the world champion, and maybe never a true OG AEW star to actually hold the belt. And speaking of hold the world champion, without MJF, who's going to hold the world title? Full Gear 2022 still happens. MJF fought Mox. He beat Mox. What happens? Well, since MJF is not in the company, well, Jon Moxley's obviously still going to be the champion. Or they're going to give it to Adam Page during this time. So either way, we're going to see Adam Page versus Mox at Full Gear, and someone's just going to take the win. After that, we would then get to Revolution, where Bryan Danielson's still kind of a top contender, and we still have to do the 60-minute Iron Man match, I assume. And legitimately at that point, Bryan could win the World Champion here as well. It depends on who he's fighting. Also, having to do the whole thing between Mox and Bryan would be kind of complicated. So we'll go with the safe choice. Say Hangman wins the belt, and we get Hangman Adam Page versus Bryan Danielson instead. So I think that we could probably see Bryan probably win. Maybe, I don't know. And not only that, but you now got to talk about the 4 pillars. Well, I mean, not the 4 pillars, because the 4 pillars don't exist anymore. We got to talk about Jungle Boy, Sammy Guevara, and we got to talk about Darby Allin. If MJF wasn't around and we still got Danielson, one of those guys are probably going to fight either Danielson or Mox or Hangman, and who knows, maybe Jungle Boy, maybe Sammy Guevara, maybe Darby Allin, one of those 3 could have hold the world champion instead. And overall, All Elite Wrestling, while it's still kind of short of a company, while MJF doesn't really play that big of a role, like, he's one of those guys where it's like, he's the literal equivalent of Kokishi to Danganronpa V3, where he's not important in the early stuff, but then the more you advance into what's happening, the more you realize this dude's playing a key role in the company in this kind of thing. MJF wasn't important back in 2019 and 2020. In 2021, it was debatable on whether he's important or not. But 2022, the moment he dropped the pipe bomb, that's when he got seen as a top star. Without that moment, you're kind of screwed around with the world title picture alone, because you could be seeing other world champions. Like, that's a hard kind of thing to see. It honestly depends on what's happening. Someone else is probably going to hold the world title instead. More than likely between Mox, Hangman, Danielson, heck, maybe Jungle, Sammy, or Darby. Because, if we're being logical, those guys were MJF's opponents. So for throwing MJF's opponents at whoever was kind of doing all that, they're going to be holding the champion. It does honestly depends on who you would want to book as the champion during that point of AEW. Personally speaking, if I were to book the current champion, I'd probably have Danielson hold the belt at this point currently. And that would kind of be it for AEW. So far, AEW would also have really big changes. WWE has big changes and kind of not big at the same time. AEW, at first, there's not really a big change, save for a few nitpicks. But then the more you advance into the years, the more you see that AEW really needs MJF to kind of hold that company together. They need him as that big main antagonist for some up-and-coming hero to slay on their journey to win the world champion. And overall, that's kind of the role MJF's playing. And honestly, if you just get MJF out of WWE, like if he were to never go to the Indies and he just got signed away to Tough Enough, and he basically never got the chance to go to AEW, that is a very hard thing to see. And WWE and AEW as a whole, let alone the entire wrestling world, would have changed a lot had MJF been signed to Tough Enough, and let alone been signed to WWE straight after that. But overall, that's just my little video on this scenario. I hope you guys enjoy the little discussion I made. I hope I was able to make an interesting storyline out of this and kind of talk about some logical things that could happen while making up some fantasy booking along the ways, while also forcing a man who has a literal heart issue to step back into a wrestling ring into another wrestling match. Thank you for watching this, and I'll see y'all next time.